All right. So, everyone, welcome again to episode 4 of Design Summer Sessions. And we'll do some quick introductions and we will jump right in. And Juan, why don't you kick us off with an introduction and introduce the topic?
Awesome. Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Juan, independent designer, artist, specializing in identity and brand, lover of painting and record shopping. And this week's topic is fear, how to navigate fear, how to handle anxieties and insecurities in a creative career, and such other topics.
Amazing. I'm Jason Schwartz, creative director at Bright Bright Great, lover of Back to the Future 2, horror movies, and Taco Bell. And Gina.
Nice.
I'm Gina. I am a designer at BBG, freelance designer and digital artist as well. Lover of Pokemon, capybaras, and Maddie Healy from the 1975.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool. So we are talking. So the series in general is targeted at designers of all levels. We've had guests of all levels, and talking fear is another topic that is going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different. It will mean something different to everybody because we all have different. I was thinking about this between last week and this week, and just spitballing without even thinking about the topic in general. And I don't know, Juan, if you have any particular like sub questions, but in the design industry, there could be things like fear of presenting, fear of public speaking, fear, am I not good enough, fear of skills, fear of always being needing to learn what's next, fear of growth. This kind of goes back. Fear of, is my process wrong? Fear of, am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? So there's a million things that can be rolled up in here. And there might be some really interesting fear points that someone might have that someone else might not have at all. And it might just be specific to that person, is not a public speaker, and that would affect presenting to clients and going into meetings and things like that. And then there might be someone else whose fear is so heavily rooted in like career advancement and things like that, that all the other things they might be totally perfect at. So I'm gonna leave it to you two to start the conversation. What would be on your mind if you were talking about like fear and design? Because there's other things too for me, like fear of maintaining client relationships and fear of payroll and fear of making sure that we can cover our insurance and all that, those kinds of things, which I definitely think would be a somewhat specific set of people who would be listening to this, but it's kind of more where my fears are these days than the other stuff. So I'd love to hear first from you two as to things that could come up. And Juan, why don't you start, because this was a topic that is important to you and you brought it up. So let's start there, and then Gina go second, and then we could kind of keep the conversation going.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your preface. I think this question stemmed from my initial sets of fears coming out of school. And, I think I mentioned this in the last topic we did, but since I only went to community college and I only took about 3 so-and-so considered art classes, the rest of my teachings and learnings about design and creativity have pretty much been self-taught or self-led by, other thought leaders at jobs or peers. So I think a big fear of mine when I was younger-ish like 3 or 4 years ago was, is my value, is my worth based on the skills that I know and the skills that I am ambitious to learn, or is that just set upon like what I've already done and the kind of people I've met and the kind of things that I've worked on versus, my ambition and my drive, which is the other topic we discussed 2 weeks ago? Or is it just like always changing depending on who I'm working with or who I'm working for? Is it really not up to me? And is it just, this kind of imaginary creative economy that we're not really in control of? And that was my biggest fear coming out of school and being really fresh to the design community. Not so much now, but that's where I kind of started
So
and where this question came from.
are you saying like fear of value? Like
Yes, yeah.
fear of what can I bring to a team or something like that, and or like what am I worth or those kinds of things? Because
I think
I could at least respond as to how we hire and things like that. Like that might help for that particular question. I also know that we're not everybody else, but I know kind of I've done it now for 25 years, so I can at least explain what I see that kind of pairs with that. So Gina, do you want to jump in first, or do you think we should answer this question and then?
You can answer this question because I think it pertains a bit to me too, not having studied design, just studying like communication arts and it just being my minor. We only had 3 classes, so we went through just like basic 1, 2, 3. So entering the job world and like wanting to do design was also like definitely a fearful process of like, I don't know like what I bring to the table versus another person, and like, am I going to show up at a job and have no idea like what I'm doing? Yeah, so kind of
So similarly, I have when we brought this up last episode 3, I don't have any formal training either. I have 2 degrees in industrial design, and I think that my undergrad was heavily into like sketching and rendering and things that the computer does. And then I think my master's was heavily weighted in design thinking. Neither were graphic design. So one of the things, and actually I definitely want to talk about this when we come back around to me, is it took me like years to break in. The fear was that I'll never, am I going to be 70 and still never got a job in this? But let's go back to you're getting out of school, or maybe you have a couple years experience. What's my value? And I think that there's a couple different ways that people would look at this. So Juan, I noticed again, you said I only have community college. Doesn't matter. The word only needs to be dropped from that because it's still learnings. It doesn't really matter as long as you're learning something. The value on that and the flip is I do not look for a degree, and that does not matter for me. For years and years and years and years, that was one of the things that was really important in that initial pass the resume test kind of thing is, oh, what school did they go to? Is that a good school? Okay, what else did they do? And that's why forever I get resumes that are like, well, I was a line cook or I was a lifeguard and all these things. And it's like going back in time and it's like, who gives a shit? I don't really care about any of these things. The thing that matters to me is what skills do you have now and what potential do I see in the future? So I am not a person who looks for a degree. I actually do not care at all if that's on there. But what I do look at is what have you been able to accomplish so far given your length of time in the field? And that opens up a whole bunch of questions because there could be people who have had really shitty jobs for their first 2 or 3 years, and none of that is a portfolio piece, which to someone looking for like how complete are your design skills, you might not be able to show it with where you work. for me, my first couple jobs, I did not have those pieces that were portfolio pieces. So everything that was in my portfolio was a passion project because I had to be able to show good design, and I wasn't getting it from my job. So I wouldn't be looking at like a degree. I would be looking at your URL. I would be looking at what you're doing. I would be looking at the things you're doing in the space that add potential to like where you could go. So just having the two of you on this call, Juan, the reason why we wanted to keep in conversation going after it was a random reach out is because you already have really great skills and you have a ton of potential. I want to stay connected because I think you're cool, and also you could work down the road with me or Amy or whatever. Gina, same kind of thing. When you had applied, I saw that you were working with a community that you had started building, and you have a lot of illustration skills, and you didn't necessarily have the UI or design skills, but I think after a year or however long, you see that our process is pretty much the same every time. Now you just have to get better in the process the next time. And that's the growth that you would be looking for. Other things that I would say are fear for like junior designers, and it's an interesting time right now, is that salaries are dropping. I think 50%, I read some sort of statistic that there are a lot of people who are either getting fired or leaving, but I was reading about this from a business perspective, was that if a business offered to try to keep all of the jobs intact, I think it was 1 in 2 in a team said they would stay for less money to maintain that stability in salary right now. That isn't something that really has ever happened, but I had a breakfast with another agency owner in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and everyone on his team, in a time of like distress, which is now post-COVID, tech is not spending money, clients are not spending, everything is tightening. Everyone chose to take a pay cut versus dismantling the team. And I think that showed like I think it shows that people who really like their team want to stick around and see the end of that, because then it's okay, well, now we're back to normal and we could do raises because things are a little bit back to normal. I know there's a ton of fear in things like salary. And that's one of those things too, where everyone is like, oh, my friend, is an apprentice at Facebook and she makes $150,000. And typically my response to that would be, go ask your parents how much they make. Just get a sense of what the real world is like, because that salary is not a sustainable thing. And we've seen it this year. Facebook laid off a shit ton of people, like half their staff. Twitter laid off 85% of their staff. And it's because we've created this like junior designer, middle designer, senior designer, junior manager, middle manager, senior manager, approval manager, senior approval manager. And it's like only 2 of those people need to exist. We don't need 900 other people to do it, but tech has had so much money, they created this bloat that has made that kind of, and that leads back a little bit to like momentum and time too, and why I even started BBG. I don't want to waste time in 10,000 meetings when I could just be making stuff. So that value thing is really how much skills you have and where do you think you can go. And I would look at that value and say, there's a ton of potential in this person. They have that value to me, as opposed to they have a master's in this thing and they have continued on. There's a lot of teachers who are teaching design who aren't even really good designers themselves. So it's like, can you dissect the skills out of there to look for the value? And as you work with a team too, I continue to relook at that myself, which is this person at bringing that value back? We expect that person if they're going to be worth X amount of money, can bring that value back and then some. And so I kind of look at that from another standpoint too, after someone is hired.
Jason, may I ask you a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
Just like speaking on tech and the economy in that situation. So like me personally, I was one of many people who got laid off from Compass, and that was my first job. So, and that was, it's in real estate, but it's also in tech because they're kind of like a
Yeah.
pseudo company on
Yeah.
that. But so after that happened, I never really like felt bad about it happening, or I never blamed myself because I knew it was out of my control. But I did get like anxious and kind of not panicky, but just nervous about where I can go next because I had that like looming over my head, like, oh, I was dispensable or disposable to one company. So will that make me dispensable to another? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess that's another fear that kind of things happen in ups and downs. And so any company making layoffs right now, it's not really, for a lot of them, it's not really in their control. We have a lot less money that we're working with right now than we did 3 years ago because there's less money. This goes into something that I was kind of thinking about too, which is if all the businesses lay off all the creatives and all the designers, and we're not, all of a sudden we don't have these teams, it's like, oh, well, that might be great for a small team, but it's like on the reverse, I think of it just in general that we're kind of like strangling our own economy because some of the companies have the money to still build their products and do these things. And if everyone turns off the faucet all at once, it only gets worse. And I think that that's kind of what's happening right now, is that if nobody is continuing to do these things, or a lot less, it puts everyone, even the fringe people, like I'd consider BBG to be a fringe. We're helpers. We are like the team that people call to come in and like bolt on to their team. But if that other company doesn't have a team, we have nothing to bolt on to. And people will just kind of like look at it for, oh, well, we just need them as a Band-Aid right now. But that's not how we're even our best. We're our best when we work with people that we have this great process going. Tech layoffs and layoffs in general, we haven't had an epidemic like COVID that we've all seen. The only thing I can compare it to in time is like 2007, 2008, which was the severe housing crisis when a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people didn't know what to do next. The economy tanked. And then also like September 11th, 2001, I was working at that time. Well, I was trying to find a job at that time, but everybody laid everybody off. The economy stopped for a year. It came back, but you have these waves where it's good and then you have these waves where it's bad. I think that it's going to be real rough for a lot of people in the like very low level AI space because AI can do their job. We've already started using it in BBG for like lowest level copywriting and things like that. And I hate to say it because good copywriting will never be replicated like heart. You bring your soul in there. But I do think that a lot of like minuscule, smaller tasks and stuff can be replaced by a computer. For us, I've never really felt that as much. Like developers, would they be scared when a CMS comes around? And it's like, no, embrace the CMS. But we're producing really interesting AI imagery, and there's a lot of stuff out there that I would think photography and illustration and copy are kind of in danger a little bit. And the best will succeed, but also the others won't. So to just go back to your question about like getting laid off and like being anxious, I think everybody would be.
Yes, Jason.
Okay. That was Siri. I think everybody would kind of be in that situation. I don't think that's like a junior or mid. I think the difference would be what is riding on that layoff. Like if you could keep it together and start moving to freelance, great. For me, if I'm laid off, I have a family, I have kids. Like, can I pay for preschool? When we had a big change this year in um, Amy, my wife, who was on one of the previous, she started her own studio, but she left her job. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, the family's insurance was with you. And all of a sudden it's like $45,000 a year of insurance that have to get picked up. That's a big anxiety that came out of nowhere. And so it's like, what are those pieces for everybody at all, points of their career? Can I not pay my mortgage? What do I have to get rid of a car? Can I ride it out? Should I be looking for more freelance? And I don't think those fears ever go away.
That makes sense. I guess is a
I also think those
reassurance.
fears shouldn't go away. I feel like if that is completely gone, like someone is getting paid too much. I mean, it like you can't, and that's how tech has kind of been. Like people are, I saw an AI job this morning at like a big firm, $800,000. That's a lot of money. Yeah, you'd be
That's
running
crazy.
like you'd be able to make that firm millions and millions of dollars, or maybe billions of dollars, but like maybe that's too much.
Right.
So Gina, keep us going with thoughts.
I think one of my biggest fears, and maybe it's not just like an individual fear, but like a fear for the community and just like in the times that are existing right now, is just the fear of like how to be like a marginalized group in design and like still be able to make it. Like I think as a woman, I'm a white woman. I can't even imagine what it's like for like a Hispanic woman or a Black woman or Asian, whatever. To get into graphic design, I think there's such a barrier to entry, and it makes it even hard for like oppressed people to join. Like, for example, you need a computer, like you need all these programs, you need to have time to use all these programs, to learn all these programs. Like somebody who's working on minimum wage or somebody who doesn't have access to internet or like stability isn't able to join like the community that's here. And it's really hard when and unfair, and I don't know if there's ever going to be a solution, if the fear is always going to exist, that like there's always going to be somebody who has like more time than you and are less and less oppressed than you and are able to do better and better, and these people are like being recognized, and we're missing out on like huge talent and like
Yeah.
huge like opportunities for people who just like can't afford to do graphic design. I think about, I'm like a proud member of the AIGA, like gonna be a board member here in my city, and it's like to even join AIGA is like $150, and then to enroll in like any of these like award ceremonies or like get nominated for an award, like you have to pay out like $200-300 just to submit an application. It's like you're, by doing this, you're leaving out such like a huge group of marginalized people who like
Yeah.
may be as, or if not more talented than just the people who have the money and the time.
I think the system could be its own whole 30 minutes because
Yeah.
it's rigged. It's for sure the United States is built upon this whole thing. I mean, we can go back all the way to the beginning and everything is the people who are successful now used labor that was, not usable. So I think we put a pin in just that in particular because we could talk for 30 minutes just about that. But the thing that I would say, if you have that as a fear, is like, how do I improve this, you have to make the change. So you have to give time, you have to volunteer, you have to help people. I will say that the cost and barrier of entry is a lot cheaper and better now than it ever has been, because you can buy a computer, subscribe to Figma, and watch YouTube videos to learn, versus like when I was in college, I had to go to the computer lab, like, but I had to pay to go to the college. That's a huge barrier of money, when I think you could buy a MacBook Air if you can get there, or find, go on Craigslist and buy like a computer that's used, couple $100. I remember the first computer that my dad purchased when I was a little kid. He had to buy it in cash. It was like, I don't even know how much it cost, but it was a lot. And that computer did almost nothing and couldn't, I mean, he used it. The computer he was using was like floppy disks were like this big and stuff. But I do think that you could get by and become really excellent with very few tools right now, comparatively. When I was in college, you had to buy Adobe for $2,000 or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. And now these tools are coming out and getting a little better. So I would say that, fonts, like my first job, my company would not buy a paid font. This is in 2001. Like, if we're building this product, what are we using? It has to be Arial. That's it, because that's the only font that would work that doesn't completely suck without buying fonts. And now you have like Google fonts, and we have built-in libraries and things inside our tools. So I would at least like to think that as a community, technology has helped us and is getting cheaper to hopefully make that more attainable for all. But I totally agree with you that it's not. And I don't know how to make that better outside of giving away my old computers, or tech that I have that might be a little bit outdated, for if I want to have like cutting edge, donate it and things like that. And I do that stuff, like running a business. Like, we don't keep our old stuff, but I can't promise that that's going to make someone a good designer.
Yeah.
So we just have a couple minutes left. So are there any sub questions related, or any kind of like offshoots we want to talk about?
Well, I think I just want to give Gina like my perspective, because I do come from like a minority background. And so I'll say that the reason I keep bringing up like, oh, I only went to community college, is because I'm a DACA recipient. So for me, I was never able to receive government funding in terms of loans. I got scholarships and that, but that only helps so much. So you can't really go off of that for a university. So like Jason is saying, I totally agree with his point. Like, it's getting a little bit more accessible to kind of self-teach and get resources for yourself on a minuscule level, right? Not this grand, huge network that maybe some other people have, but it's there. And you just have to work a little harder, which is unfortunate, to access them, but you'll get there eventually. And so, one of the fears of like going into a corporate job is like, every time you or I would want to even apply to work at these big corporations, you have to submit, a work permit with the US government, and you have to pay $500-600 every 2 years for that to even be received to the government, not even like you being accepted. So I think, my perspective has always been that I always have to work a little bit harder and sacrifice more than the average person. But at the end of the day, like when I do reach my milestones and goals, it feels so much more rewarding. Like getting hired for the first time, getting an internship, like that felt amazing, incredible. And so you start to not really care about salaries and, things like that, or rewards. You start to care more about like the little things, like getting hired or getting a project that does really well. So I think that's why, like, as a freelancer, you try to work harder, or you get more pro bono projects that you kind of have like a feeling for, like, oh, this person's doing a great thing, and I come from a similar background, so I'm going to help them out for free. So I think it's just like it has its pros and cons, but I definitely agree. Like it's still never going to be perfect, unfortunately, but it can always get a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I think if as long as everybody's conscious of that, like conscientious of that fact, you give an opportunity if you can. You try to open up your doors if you can, those kinds of things. And I think that that's a little bit it's been a little bit difficult for both of your career paths because things have been closed a lot of times. So there hasn't been the same opportunities to just go and be in places. So we're at 30, but I want to wrap this with a couple thoughts. One, if anyone is listening to this who isn't able to make the ends meet and is like really struggling with financial stuff, I would most definitely recommend reaching out to any of these tools and explaining kind of your situation. Most likely AIGA would comp a membership if you like. That's who AIGA is looking for, people who want to get in and need all the support structure. If you can't make it happen up front, I'm sure they would give you a free membership, and then you can come around 30 years from now and help support the next generation. Same kind of things. There's a lot of times people have emailed me where they say, I don't see that you have like student usage fonts on Avondale Typeco. And I'm like barely able to keep it together, but I really want to use your font for this really cool project. I just give it to them for free. And, I don't know that the story is true and whatever, but it sounds like a good scenario and it sounds genuine. And so I'm not really here to like do background checks. But if someone comes to me and is like, hey, you have this, and it doesn't cost me anything to give someone a license of a typeface, I'll just do it. And there has been no instances that I've said no. People are, and this goes back to something we talked about earlier, is I think the community is open when people ask to do stuff like that. As long as it's not like, hey, can you give me $1,000 cash? Like, no, of course I can't, but I can give you our fonts. I can help you, point you in the right direction. I can give you information. So I think that the community is good at that kind of stuff, and you just need to ask. And the second point, which I think Juan kind of goes back to like trying a little bit harder, I think that first step is always really, really difficult for everybody. And maybe the system has made it a little easier for some people to take that first step. But if you are struggling with that first step, reach out and explain that what your situation is and what you're trying to do, and maybe it'll help open that first door. I have everything going for me. I had help with college tuition. I, am the right profile of the general, I'm white, I'm Caucasian male. I come from a town that's, not the middle class kind of stuff. And even I felt like I had a really hard time breaking in at the beginning. It took me years. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? When I went to college and I got the degree that everyone said I needed to get, and I'm like willing to work 24 hours a day and sleep over if that's what it takes. And I know people who know people, and it still was difficult. So I can only imagine adding the layers on that, on top of it, It's just so tough. So fear is real. I think we all have it. And I think that it's nice to keep it as like a motivating thing in the back, but it's bad when it's like the primary driver of everything. And so I hope that if it's the primary thing for some people, that tools are out there to help make those advancements and keep careers moving and stuff like that. Otherwise, try to link up with someone who can offer that opportunity, but don't give up knowing that everything is kind of stacked against you. there's times where people are like, my parents are sick and I have to have a really this will be like a really crazy specific thing, but like I have to take a really non-normalized work schedule because I have to take care of my parents. Like that doesn't work at 98% of places, but find the 2% that it would work. And there's probably some really great opportunities in there to make it happen. Like I think we're going to be going back to in office kind of thing for everybody. Like it's work from home, I think is going to be over soon. But there will still be opportunities where there's flexibility to make it work for people who everything isn't handed to them. Because like going to work costs money. You need a car, you need public transportation, like it all goes together. So if for anyone watching, we'd love to hear from you. Like, what are some of the fears that you have had with being in the space and or breaking in? And we could go on this topic forever because it's so interesting and everyone has different fears. So thank you for listening, and I guess tune into the next one and go back and listen to the previous ones.